or you're doing it to make people happy, and that can kill the fun. I mean, I'm not saying it's not fun to make people happy, but I'm just saying if that becomes your overriding goal, then you're not doing it for you anymore. You're doing it for somebody else. So, and Mame's never dealt with money. I don't want to be involved in that stuff. That's just, I don't know. Too many expectations to set, too many potential ways things could go sour, so I don't even want to know about it. So my recommendation is ignore fame and fortune. If you're really doing a project for yourself, do it for yourself, and don't worry what comes out of it. Something may come out of it afterwards or as a sideline or whatever, and you may become your job. That's great. Then it's your job. Admit it, that's your job, and it's not your fun little project that it used to be. But I haven't gotten that point yet either, so it's still a little fun little project for me. So, in the end, why do I love working on it? It's a huge project. As I said, I know there are 3,000 plus supported games in it, and I know that 2,900 of them have problems. There's always more to do. We could do it better. We try to do the best we can with what we've got, with what we know. Taking time to do measurements on PCBs to actually figure out what the actual frame rates are and what clocks are, and to see what little subtle behaviors happen, and to make it so that people can write new code on the platforms and have it run just the first time on the real hardware when they put it. That'd be really cool if we could get to that point. I mean, to me, then you've really done it right. And it becomes important when you look at stuff like, what is the Miss Pac-Man's or the Pac-Man's kill screen? To get that to look right, you have to make sure that when you read a memory location that's not mapped, that you do the right thing. Because if you don't, then you don't get exactly the right behavior, and the tunnels show up in different spots, and you're not getting the right kill screen behavior. So, I think we get a lot of that stuff right because it's known. It's more the stuff that's unknown, or when new people try to do stuff, then we don't necessarily get that right, and that can always be better. And some people get more attention than others, and some drivers get more attention than others. But the other reason I love working on Mame, as I said, nothing beats seeing something coming up and running for the first time. You're like, wow, so that's how it worked. I put it all together. I grabbed the PCA from here, and the sound chip from here, and the CPU from here, and I took some code. I just ran it, and it worked. That's awesome. I love to see how things work. So, there's always something new to find out. I love the fact that I learned to read schematics as a result of this, and that I can, now take a digital circuit and pretty much figure out how it all works, and find some cool things, like just how neat the Galaxian hardware was, and why it was abused and replicated billions of times for all kinds of different games, because it really is fairly elegantly designed, very simple, low chip count hardware. Another reason I love it is my software engineering challenge of make a universal emulation system. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to make Mame more universal. There's a sister project to Mame called Mess, which is for consoles and computers. It's not as well, people don't know about it as much. There's not as much active development. There's just a few guys. But they can leverage all the stuff that we do in Mame. And that's a good and bad thing. On the good side, they get all the work that we do. And on the bad side, every time I make it some global system-wide change, they have to spend weeks catching up and fixing everything. So that's got its good and bad sides. But they have some really good systems in there. They have very good Atari 2600 emulation. They have good solid, Nintendo emulation and various other computer systems. And they have a lot of really weird systems. Like there's some guy in Poland or somewhere is adding all these Eastern European computer systems you've never heard of before. But eventually we were able to emulate the system that ran the original Tetris, back in Russia or something. It's there's some cool stuff that you can come out of that thing. So just being able to constantly say, hey, this is really cool stuff. These guys have the same kind of flavor we do. I like to cooperate with them. I'd like to make the central core of Mame even more usable for both projects. And for any other projects, frankly, that come along that want to base off of something that's really rich. There's a lot of work into it. I love to know that my work has helped others. So I know that people have used Mame to figure out, oh, I've got bad boards. I know people have used Mame to figure out, oh, my hard drive died on my game, and I was able to recreate it and rebuild it based on the information that we had in Mame. I know that people have debugged problems. There's a guy who's gone through and figured out all the kill screens in some of the famous games using the debugger, and has like posted articles about why the bug exists and why when Donkey Kong gets to a certain screen it dies, and here's a patch to fix it so you could actually like play past that screen if you really wanted to. People are kind of nuts like me, and you know, in the end I freaking love the arcade. I mean, consoles are okay, but arcade games, I don't know. I love to come here. I love the smell of the old wood in the arcade machines. I love to, you know, see the bright vector, black and white vector games and the Laserdisc games. You know, I love that stuff. I want that stuff to live on. And I want to know how it works. And I want, you know, I just love the arcade. So really, in the end, I'm just going to say, do it for you first. Make sure that you're benefiting from what you do. And so whenever I get hate mail or whenever people tell me I'm doing stuff wrong, I look back and say, am I really doing it wrong? Well, maybe it's their opinion, but for what I really want to do, I think I'm doing what I really want to do, and that's why I keep working on it. So, you know, this is my summary, my path to enlightenment. Those are all the tips I had. So if you're working on a project on your own, I recommend, you know, keeping focus on what you really want to do and just do it for you and ignore everybody else, because really it's all about you, and don't let money or thoughts of fame get in the way. So I think that's all. Yay. I don't know how much time we have, probably close to 0. So if you have a couple.
Started late, hopefully people can be patient. I think there are a lot of questions.
I think take a couple of questions if you want. So start there.
You covered sort of the good and the bad side of source code as documentation.
Yeah.
Suppose that someone wanted to write a specific emulator for, say, a 6502 or something in another language, and wanted to use Mame, which is obviously a reasonably good 6502 emulator, as sort of a reference. Mm-hmm. And I hope this isn't offline, a terribly complicated offline question. Where in the Mame source would you say to go first?
Well, there's a directory called CPU, okay, and there's a directory under that called M6502. That's where you want to look. But anyway, the question was, if people wanted to write, you know, use Mame as a reference, which is exactly what it's there for. So I've gotten questions saying, can I look at your code and do this? And I can understand that because some companies are super paranoid about like GPL, you know, virility or whatever that word is, and all that other good stuff. Yes, absolutely look at the code. Mame's license is essentially BSD, so there's no virusy thing about it. Like, as long as you look at it and you say, okay, this is how it works, you can write your own code, that's fine. Frankly, I wish that I could, for my code personally, I'd like to say, yeah, everybody use the code because I don't really care. But there are some folks, of the 100 developers, who really get under their skin if somebody else is using their code without, because they put all that work in for free. So for that reason, we sort of have the rule about it. But if you want to look, you know, the source code is pretty well organized. And all the CPU emulators, there's, you know, probably 50 plus CPUs that we emulate, and a lot of them are really battle hardened and well tested. So that's a great place to start if you want to do a CPU emulator, because that's one of the hardest things. Is you'll get it 99% right, and there'll be some subtle behavior that is really hard to reproduce. And take another question in the back.
I want to say 2 things. One is I want to say thanks for doing what you're doing, and my question is, how much time do you and do you think the other Mame developers actually spend playing the games that you emulate?
I don't know I can't speak for anybody else. It's sad in a way, because I put so much work into this thing and I never play it. I mean, yeah, sure, I'll play a round of this or that to see if something's working or whatever, but for me the challenge and the interest is, how did it work? Can I make it work better? And what don't I know about this thing? You know, I find that interesting probably more than playing the game, so I'm a little bit of freaky that way. I do have a couple of cabinets at home. They kind of can occasionally come on when they work. I have put a Mame computer in a cabinet just for fun because it seems like a cool thing to do. I've turned it on a couple times. It's kind of unfortunate, but you know, that's just the way it goes. You know, I do love the games.